Hello everybody, welcome to video number 22 in my Richard Laymon horror novel review series. Today I'm talking about Night Show from 1984. Here's the cover art by, as usual, Steve Crisp, and also as usual, I really like it. And the spine, it's 279 pages, one of his shortest books, and here is the back, which says, "High school prankster Tony Johnson has a weird idea of fun. He likes frightening the life out of people. When he kidnaps school beauty Linda Allison and locks her in a haunted house for the night, that's his idea of a joke. But Linda doesn't see the funny side. Now Tony has moved to Hollywood determined to break into horror movies. His target is special effects queen Danny Larson. He's willing to go to any lengths to impress her. By now he's forgotten about Linda, but she's a girl with vengeance in her heart, and she certainly hasn't forgotten him." Right, so 1984, this is among Laymon's early work. And like most of his early work, it's very thin on characterization. So for that reason, I'm going to focus here on the story, on the plot. The plot is this. It opens with a prologue whereby these three, I don't know exactly how old they are, but I'm going to guess something like 16 or 17. These three boys kidnap off the street this girl called Linda, who is depicted as being the high school beauty, like it said on the back there. They drive her off to a supposedly haunted house and tie her up in there. For what reason? That wasn't very well explained. Apparently, they don't like her because she's beautiful and she thinks she's better than they are, and these three guys are the archetypal Layman losers and outcasts. And one of those three in particular is this fella called Tony, who will end up being the villain of the story. So they kidnap her, they drive her off and to the house, and what they want to do basically is just to scare her, or rather Tony, the leader of the gang, wants to scare her. They do, and at the end of this prank, Linda eventually frees herself, staggers out into a road and gets hit by a car and knocked into a coma. End of prologue. And then we jump to the main action, which is set, again, it's not clear, but it could be a year later or some months later, I don't know. But Linda was in a coma and all banged up, and her legs were all smashed to pieces. So I'm going to say a year or so later. What I do know is that by this time, Tony is 18 years old. And he has moved from New York, where the prologue took place, to Hollywood, California, because he wants to break into horror films. Like it said on the back there, his big thing in life is terrifying people. So he wants to get into the movie industry and deal and work in horror films. To do that, he imposes himself on the heroine of our story, who is Danny Larson. And she is the #1 special effects queen in Hollywood, in the horror genre. And to worm his way into her life, what Tony does in the beginning is to try to legitimately frighten her in various ways. And then he announces himself to her and tells her what he wants. He wants to become her apprentice and learn from her. And that's basically the setup of the book. Now, the novel has two strands to it. The main strand involves Danny, the makeup queen, effects queen, her boyfriend Jack, and their attempts to deal with this very odd young man, this clearly very, very troubled and disturbed young man in Tony. Danny does decide to kind of be friendly towards him and show him the ropes a little bit, because she figures that's the best way to... Well, again, this is one of the things in the book which are really weird, but for some reason she figures that's the best way to appease the guy and not trigger him too much, and to control him and not make him go off the deep end. So that's the main strand of the book. It's how Danny and Jack dealing with the madness of young Tony. The more interesting strand, though, and unfortunately it's the lesser one, involves Linda coming out of her coma. She doesn't tell the police what happened, because in her mind, what Laymon describes, the sly part of her mind, as soon as she wakes up from the coma, has decided to take revenge on those three boys who did that to her. And that part of the novel is very reminiscent of the film I Spit on Your Grave, which Richard Laymon has made no secret that he's a big fan of that film. He mentions I Spit on Your Grave in several of his books. In my review of Body Rides, I forgot to mention one detail, that at the beginning of the novel Body Rise, the main character is driving to a video store to return 2 video cassettes, one of which was I Spit on Your Grave. And the reason why I kind of chuckle at that is because it's revealed that he was planning to watch those 2 movies with his fairly new girlfriend, which, if you've ever seen I Spit in Your Grave, you'll know is the worst date movie you could ever put on, unless you've decided to reveal to your girlfriend that you're actually a psycho. And Laymon was, I suppose, predictably very taken with that film, because his books are always obsessed with rape and violence and stuff like that. So, anyway, back to the point. The story involving Linda and her revenge, I enjoyed. She picks them off. Firstly, she picks off the 2 more minor characters. And I like how each one of those was done. I really enjoyed a scene where she gets Tony's address, because she really wants to track down Tony, the ringleader of that stunt. And to do that, she has to get his address in Hollywood. And I liked very much one particular scene where she sneaks into a house and does that. So, and then at the end, she confronts Tony, and I enjoyed that finale as well. But yeah, the main criticism that I have to make of this book is the characterization, mainly concerning Danny Larson, because literally every single decision she makes with regard to handling this Tony is the wrong decision, and no one with any semblance of a brain would ever do any of these things. He is clearly a dangerously disturbed individual. He is clearly a pathological liar. He's clearly a psychopath in the way that he manipulates and uses superficial charm to get into people's lives, but then, has these flashes of anger which reveal ferocious violence and this kind of nihilistic disregard for social norms. I mean, in order to impress her, firstly he begins by trying to frighten Danny, but then he moves on to trying to terrify other innocent people in Danny's company. And each and every time he does stupid stuff like this, Danny is just taking pity on him and, continuing to keep him in her life. And this is a kid who just showed up on her doorstep, having already intruded into her private life by spying on her at the swimming pool, spying on her making love with her boyfriend, pulling a stunt where he puts a fake severed head on her diving board. All this kind of crazy stuff, which, for any one of which you would call the police immediately. And anyway, so the point is that it's a very frustrating read in that sense, because you're constantly pulled out of the story by the awareness that no one would ever do this, especially not an otherwise intelligent woman, which is what Danny is presented as. I mean, there's a scene where Tony tells her that his mother just died and he needs company and he's feeling down, which, he's so patently lying. And as the reader, he's lying. Jack, the boyfriend, instantly knows he's lying, but Danny doesn't figure it out. And it's just one of those really frustrating characters that happen sometimes in horror, who are just so dumb they can't see what's right in front of their eyes. And it's if it only happens on one occasion with one particular event, that's okay. But when it's every single time, it gets, well, it's just incredulous, and there's no reason to get invested in the story if that's what it's going to be, if it's just going to be constantly unbelievable situations. So I realize that I've just spent the last couple of minutes being highly critical, and despite what I've just said, I didn't dislike reading this. I did actually enjoy it in many ways, which I wasn't expecting to, because Laymon's early work is really not his best work. Between, stuff like this and The Woods Are Dark and All Hallows Eve and Beware, only Out Are the Lights is, in my opinion, a really great novel from him from his early period. And funnily enough, that one was written directly before this one, and both of them deal with the horror film industry, so they have a connection. This isn't the worst of his early work, but it's also not his best. It falls into the middle. I so wanted to like this more than I did, because it's got all the elements of what a horror fan should love. I mean, it deals with the horror film industry, especially from the 80s, the era of practical effects. I like the parts where Laymon is describing the practical effects that Danny and Jack are designing. There's references to like Rick Baker and Tom Savini. There are references to classic films of that era. Texas Chainsaw Massacre comes up a few times. So as a horror fan, as a horror geek, there's lots to enjoy from that point of view. It's very clear that Richard Laymon was just like the rest of us, or just like me anyway, in terms of loving horror and horror cinema and 80s horror. So that part was nice. What else was good? Well, like I already said, the parts involving Linda's revenge were really great. And I guess Tony was an okay villain. Laymon has certainly written worse villains in the sense of being one-dimensional. Tony wasn't the worst of his characterization. He was a very annoying character, wavering between this sly, psychotic intelligence and this whiny kid thing. But I guess in a way that's kind of what psychopaths do, isn't it? They kind of have a variety of personalities that they draw upon for whenever the occasion demands it. So, all right, let me wrap this up then. So that's Night Show from 1984. Not a bad read. Let down by poor characterization and poor decision-making by Danny Larson. But other than that, I recommend it. It won't be anywhere close to the top of my list when I do my ranking, but I also don't think it'll be at the bottom. It'll be somewhere roughly in the middle. So thank you, everyone, for watching this. That's going to finish it for this one. It's Friday afternoon here, so have a good weekend to everyone. I'll try and read another book over the weekend and be back on Monday or Tuesday with its review. So take care and bye for now.